Hey there. What can a number teach us? Just a number stitched onto a basketball jersey. 24. When Kobe Bryant changed his jersey number from 8 to 24, many people saw it as a branding decision. A fresh chapter, a different phase of a remarkable career. Something deeper was happening, I suspect, because great performers often use small gestures to reinforce larger ideas. A private commitment made visible, a reminder of the standard they intend to live up to before it becomes a signal to anyone else. What fascinates me about decisions like this is what sits underneath them, the thinking, the intention, the philosophy hiding inside something that appears ordinary from the outside. Over the last 2 years, I have become increasingly convinced of something. The most valuable lessons in history are rarely found in the headline moments. They are hidden in the small choices, the subtle decisions, the adjustments that reveal how exceptional people understood the world around them. Because studying greatness is not really about studying the past. Well, at least not for me. It's about learning how to see, how to recognize opportunity, how to recognize risk, how to make better judgments when certainty is unavailable. The old saying claims history repeats itself. My experience suggests something more precise. Patterns in history can teach us how to see what might be coming. This is what I want to explore with you today. Welcome to the Strategic Thinker, TST for short. If you are a returning listener, thank you for being here. If it's your first time with us, I'm glad you found your way here. TST is a sanctuary for your mind, a calm space away from the noise where you can pause, think more deeply, and reset your direction. Every conversation here is designed to help you approach life, work, and decisions with more intention and more clarity. I'm Alan, your host. As I've grown older, I've found myself becoming increasingly fascinated by history. What captured my attention was the decisions and the patterns, the moments when people stood in uncertainty and had to choose a direction, the trade-offs they faced, the risks they accepted, the opportunities they recognized before others could see them. When we're young, the future tends to occupy most of our attention. We are trying to build careers, create opportunities, figure out who we want to become. Our focus naturally points forward. Mine certainly did. Over time, I began to notice something. Many of the challenges we consider uniquely modern have older cousins. The technology changes, the context changes, the pace changes, and the underlying human questions often remain surprisingly familiar. How do you make decisions when information is incomplete? How do you balance ambition with patience? How do you know when to persist, when to adapt, and, more importantly, when to let go? These questions appear again and again across industries, across cultures, across generations. That realization changed how I viewed history. I stopped seeing it as a record of what happened. I started seeing it as a collection of decisions, a vast library of human judgment. Every founder, every artist, every leader, every athlete, each one navigating uncertainty in their own era, each one leaving behind clues about how they thought. That's where borrowed wisdom begins, with observation. The goal is not to become Kobe Bryant, or Coco Chanel, or Warren Buffett. The goal is to understand their world through their eyes, what they saw, what they valued, what they were willing to sacrifice, and how they made decisions when the outcome was still unknown. The real value is rarely found in copying the answer. It comes from studying how exceptional people approached the question. Over the last 2 years, through the Path to Greatness series, Through books and biographies and these episodes, I've become convinced of something. Borrowed wisdom is one of the most practical forms of strategic thinking available to us, because every life we study expands the range of possibilities we can recognize in our own. Which brings us to a subtle but important distinction. Many people approach history as a warning system, concerned that history will repeat itself. There is value in that. It captures a fraction of what the past has to offer. Every generation believes it is living through unprecedented change. The tools evolve, the technology evolves, the speed of communication evolves. And beneath these visible changes, certain patterns continue to appear. Human ambition, competition, fear, innovation, the search for meaning, the challenge of making decisions when the future remains uncertain. This is where borrowed wisdom becomes valuable. The purpose of studying those who came before us is to sharpen our perception. Consider what happens when you spend time studying great founders. You begin to recognize the relationship between patience and opportunity. You begin to notice how often success arrives through compounding rather than sudden breakthroughs, even though breakthroughs are when people start to notice. Study great athletes, and a slightly different set of patterns emerges. Preparation, discipline, recovery, the psychology of performing under pressure when expectations rise. Study great artists and creators, and you encounter something different again. Originality, craft, the tension between commercial success and creative integrity, the courage required to pursue a vision before others can fully see it. Each life shows you some similarities and the differences at the same time. Each story adds another lens through which you can interpret the world. This is why I find myself returning to seemingly small decisions. Kobe Bryant choosing 24, Coco Chanel choosing jersey fabric, Walt Disney refusing to chase short-term growth at the expense of the long game. From a distance, these moments appear minor. Up close, they reveal an entire philosophy, a way of thinking, a set of priorities, a strategic posture toward life. That is where the real value lives. Over time, you begin to recognize patterns earlier. You become more sensitive to the second-order effects. You develop a deeper appreciation for trade-offs. You see more clearly that every meaningful decision involves giving something up in order to gain something else. That awareness changes how you move through uncertainty. It does not provide certainty though. It provides perspective. Perspective is one of the most valuable assets a strategic thinker can possess, because when the future arrives, it rarely announces itself clearly. Most of the times it arrives as a weak signal, a subtle shift, a small opportunity, a decision that feels ordinary in the moment and consequential in hindsight. There are moments when I wish the people we study could simply tell us what to do next. They can't, and perhaps that is the point. What they offer instead is more durable, training in what deserves our attention. That is why the past remains so valuable, training us to see, not to predict the future. At this point, borrowed wisdom can sound almost magical, as if enough study could prepare us for every situation we might encounter. Reality is much more nuanced. Some lessons arrive through observation. Others only arrive through experience. Understanding this difference matters. We now know borrowed wisdom is powerful. It can accelerate our learning. It can expand our perspective. It can help us recognize patterns years before we might have discovered them on our own. Life also asks something of each of us that no book, no biography, and no podcast can fully provide. Experience. There's a difference between understanding an idea intellectually and understanding it experientially. One lives in the mind, the other becomes part of who you are. Consider courage. You can study courageous people for decades. You can read about explorers, entrepreneurs, athletes, and leaders who stepped into uncertainty despite fear. You can understand their reasoning. You can learn the principles that guided them. Then one day, life presents you with your own moment, a decision that carries real consequences, a path where the outcome is unclear, a choice that asks something meaningful of you. In that moment, this knowledge becomes practice. Observation becomes participation. A deeper form of understanding begins to emerge. The same principle applies to leadership. You can study great leaders extensively, learn about the communication, vision, trust, accountability, recognize what effective leadership looks like from the outside. Then comes the moment when people are looking to you, waiting for direction, seeking clarity during uncertainty. The lesson becomes real in a different way. This distinction matters because it helps us approach borrowed wisdom with the right expectations. Its purpose is to prepare us for the challenge, not eliminate it. Think of it as arriving at unfamiliar terrain with a map. The map stays in your hand. The hills, the weather, the distance remains exactly as they are. The journey, though, is still yours. What the map provides is context, orientation, and understanding of where others have traveled before. And because while lessons are earned through experience, many difficulties can be approached more intelligently through preparation. Throughout history, people have paid dearly for wisdom. Years of effort, painful mistakes, failed ventures, broken assumptions, hard-earned discoveries. When they share those lessons, they offer us something valuable, an opportunity to learn more efficiently, an opportunity to begin just a little further along the path. This is one of the lessons I find biographies so compelling. They allow us to witness decisions unfolding as they were lived, through the complexity, ambiguity, and pressure of the actual moment. From these, we begin to appreciate that great lives are rarely built through perfect decisions. They are built through learning, adjusting, recovering, and continuing. Perhaps that is one of the most useful forms of borrowed wisdom. The understanding that uncertainty is simply normal, that setbacks are part of the process, that growth often arrives through iteration rather than precision. Over time, challenges become easier to contextualize, mistakes become easier to learn from, periods of uncertainty become easier to navigate. Because we have seen enough versions of the human experience to recognize that progress often follows a familiar rhythm. Which brings me to something I have been sitting with since finishing the Chanel trilogy. When we combined borrowed wisdom and our own lived experience, something interesting happens. The value is no longer limited to what you know. It starts to influence how you see. And over time, that change in perception becomes one of the greatest rewards of sustained study. There's something almost mythological about the stories we have explored together. Kobe, Walt, Coco. Each one reads like a hero's journey in its own way, a seemingly impossible challenge, a dream that the world dismissed before it materialized, setbacks that would have ended most people, and then, eventually, something remarkable. We are drawn to these stories for a reason. At some level, we all want to be the hero of our own path. What I've been sitting with, though, is a more practical question. What ingredients actually produce these outcomes? Because the stories are different, the eras are different, the industries are entirely different, and yet something keeps appearing across all three. The first is commitment that borders on stubbornness. Kobe continuing to practice at 4 a.m. when no one was watching. Walt pressing on with Snow White while the industry called it folly. Chanel redesigning how women dressed in an era that had very clear ideas about what women were allowed to do. Whether that is confidence or stubbornness, I am not sure. Perhaps at a certain level of commitment, the distinction stops mattering. The second is harder to romanticize, but impossible to avoid. Hard work. Real, relentless, unglamorous effort. There's no version of any of these three stories that does not require it. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we focus on the vision and look away from the work. The third is the one I find most interesting. Greatness in each case was only recognizable in retrospect. Disneyland does not feel inevitable until I understand how many times it nearly did not exist. Chanel No. 5 does not feel revolutionary until you understand the world it arrived into. The Mamba mentality does not feel like a philosophy until a career's path of decisions accumulates behind it. There is something that produces these outcomes I can only call originality, the kind that cannot be fully copied because it emerged from a specific person in a specific moment, making a specific series of decisions that no one else would have made in exactly the same way. Disneyland is almost impossible to replicate, not because the rides are complicated, but because the thinking behind it was singular. Which leaves us with a question. If greatness is only visible in hindsight, and if it requires commitment and effort we cannot fully predict the outcome of, what does that leave us with? The best next decision. That is all any of us can control right now. Something as seemingly small as whether to practice today or rest, whether to keep going or step back, whether to say yes to the next opportunity or protect the direction already chosen. Kobe, Walt, Coco. Each of them made thousands of those decisions before anyone called what they were building great, a lot of which remain invisible to us. Borrowed wisdom is not about becoming a student of history. It's about becoming a better navigator of your own future. So before we close, let's bring this back to where it matters most. So, where do we go from here then? Most of us are simply trying to make good decisions, to build meaningful lives, to navigate uncertainty a little more thoughtfully than we did yesterday. That's where borrowed wisdom becomes practical, because every one of us will encounter moments where the path ahead is unclear. A career decision, a business opportunity, a transition, a risk that feels worth taking. In those moments, borrowed wisdom offers perspective. The ability to pause and ask, who has faced something similar? What patterns appear in their experience? What trade-offs did they encounter? What can I learn before I need to learn it the hard way? Or, how would Kobe or Coco approach this? Those questions do not remove uncertainty. However, they do improve our ability to navigate it. We only get one life, one set of experiences, one path through the world. Through books, conversations, biographies, history, and careful observation, we gain access to hundreds of lives, hundreds of experiments, hundreds of attempts to answer the same enduring human questions. How should I live? What's worth pursuing? How do I respond when circumstances change? Every life we study expands the range of possibilities available to us. Every perspective we absorb helps us see our own paths to greatness more clearly. A compass does not tell you exactly where the journey will lead. It helps you navigate. Borrowed wisdom serves the same purpose: direction, perspective, a better way of seeing. And when the future arrives, as uncertain as it has always been, that perspective may prove far more valuable than any prediction. Here's today's insight. The past does not tell us what will happen. It teaches us how to see what may be coming. That is the true value of borrowed wisdom. Perception, not prediction. Every life we study becomes another lens through which we can interpret the world. Every lesson expands what we thought was possible. The stories do something harder to name. They sharpen judgment in ways that only reveal themselves when judgment is actually needed. Over time, those lessons accumulate. They help us recognize patterns sooner. They help us ask better questions. They help us approach uncertainty with greater perspective and greater humility. Some lessons will always require lived experience. Life will continue to present challenges that must be felt, navigated, and understood firsthand. And thankfully so, because experience remains one of our greatest teachers. Wisdom allows us to begin a little further along the path to benefit from the insights that others spent years, sometimes decades, uncovering. One generation learning from another, one life informing the next, one lesson continuing its journey long after it was first discovered. Let's wrap this up. Over the last 2 years, I have spent a great deal of time studying remarkable lives. Founders, athletes, artists, leaders, people who pursued excellence in very different ways, under very different circumstances. What stays with me most is not their success. It is their willingness to engage deeply with the questions in front of them, to think carefully, to act deliberately, to keep learning as circumstances change around them. Each of them left something behind, an idea, a lesson, a way of seeing, a small piece of wisdom that continues to travel long after they're gone. And that, in many ways, is what Maison TST has always been about. Creating a place where those lessons can be explored together. A place where great lives become practical teachers. A place where the past helps us navigate the future with greater clarity. I often think about how fortunate we are to have access to so much accumulated wisdoms. Books, biographies, letters, interviews, conversations, entire lifetimes of experience preserved and waiting to be discovered. The opportunity before us is simple: to remain curious enough to keep learning from them, and humble enough to recognize that wisdom can arrive from places we never expected. Before we finish, I want to share one small piece of news. A new room will open within Maison TST. It's called At the Desk, a place for deeper exploration, for those who want to spend more time with the ideas behind the public conversations, for those who feel that these episodes are the beginning of a discussion rather than the end of one. I'll share more details soon. For now, I simply wanted to extend the invitation. And most importantly, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking alongside me. Thank you for allowing these conversations to become part of your journey. If you prefer to revisit today's ideas in writing, The Compass is a published companion to each episode, a concise reference you can return to whenever you need it. You will find it at maisontst.com. And if these conversations are adding something to your journey, the simplest way to make sure you never miss one is to follow the show wherever you listen. Think of it as reserving your seat in the sanctuary. As always, thank you for choosing to spend this time here with me. Your future self is being shaped by the choices you make today. Stay focused on your direction and take time to discover joy along the way. Until next time, make your next best decision and keep moving forward.